There is something modern people quietly suffer from now that the samurai understood very well. Too many people live without an inner code. They wake up and let mood decide. Stress decides. Comfort decides. Fear decides. And because of that, they are constantly being pulled around by whatever they feel in the moment. Bushido was different. It was not just a fighting philosophy, it was a way of shaping the self. It taught the samurai how to carry honor, duty, courage, discipline, and even death itself with a certain calmness. Not because life was easy, but because their values were already chosen before life got hard. And that is what makes Bushido still worth studying now. Because this is not really a video about old swords or ancient Japan. It is about what happens to a person when they stop living randomly and start living by principle. So in this video, we're going through the 5 most important traits that came from Bushido and why they still matter if you want to become harder to shake, harder to corrupt, and more at peace with yourself. Rule 5. Honor. When your behavior is not for sale. Most people don't lose themselves in big moments. They lose themselves in small ones, where it would be easier to bend, say less than what's true, do less than what's required, and quietly lower the standard. And nothing happens immediately. That's why it's dangerous. Honor in Bushido was not reputation. It was alignment. It meant your actions stayed clean, even when there was no reward for it. Because who you are was not something you adjusted based on convenience. So the modern version is simple, but uncomfortable. Act in a way you don't have to explain later, not to other people, to yourself. Because the more your behavior changes depending on pressure, the less stable your identity becomes. Rule 4. Loyalty to something higher than your mood. A life built only around how you feel becomes unstable very quickly, because how you feel changes constantly. Bushido solved this by placing loyalty above comfort. Not blind obedience, but commitment. To a role, to a duty, to something that didn't disappear just because the day felt heavy. And psychologically, this matters more than people think. Because when your life is centered only around yourself, every decision becomes a negotiation. Do I feel like it? Is this worth it? Maybe later. But when you're loyal to something higher, a responsibility, a standard, a purpose, you don't ask those questions as often. You move. So the modern translation is, choose something that deserves your consistency and stop checking your mood before you act on it. Rule 3. Courage. Acting before fear finishes speaking. Fear doesn't need to be dramatic to control you. Most of the time, it's quiet. It shows up as hesitation, delay, second guessing. And if you give it enough time, it will build a very reasonable argument for why you shouldn't move. Bushido treated courage differently, not as the absence of fear, but as the refusal to let fear make the decision, which is a small shift, but a powerful one, because courage shortens the gap between knowing and acting. So here's the practical form of that. When you know what needs to be done, move before your mind turns it into a debate. You don't need to feel ready. You need to stop giving fear time to organize itself. Rule 2. Self-control. Ending the argument with yourself. One of the most exhausting things in modern life is how much time people spend negotiating with themselves. You say you'll do something. Then you renegotiate. Then you delay. Then you adjust. And by the time you act, if you act, you've already drained half your energy just thinking about it. Bushido placed a heavy emphasis on discipline and conduct, not as productivity, as identity. Because a disciplined person doesn't need to have the same argument every day. The decision has already been made, and that creates something most people are missing. Quiet. Less overthinking. Less back and forth. Less emotional noise. So the modern tool is this. Make fewer decisions, but make them stick. Close the loop. Because every time you reopen a decision, you weaken your own authority. Rule 1. Readiness for death. The trait that makes everything else real. This is the hardest one to hear, and the most important. The samurai trained themselves to accept death, not in a dramatic way, in a clarifying way. Because once you understand, deeply, that your time is limited, a lot of things lose their grip on you. Petty fears, endless delay, the need to stay comfortable all the time. They start to look smaller, and this doesn't make life darker. It makes it sharper, more serious in the right places, more honest. Because if you remembered clearly that your time is not guaranteed, you would act differently. Not all at once, but in the small moments that shape your life. So the modern version is not extreme, it's awareness. You will not be here forever, and that should change what you tolerate, what you avoid, and what you finally decide to do. And when you put all of this together, something becomes clear. Bushido was not powerful because it made better fighters. It was powerful because it made more stable people. Honor gave them a standard. Loyalty gave them direction. Courage let them move. Discipline kept them steady. And death awareness made it all serious. That's what most people are missing. Not more motivation. Structure. Because without a code, you bend with every feeling. With one, you start to hold your shape.